Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home. Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Welcome to the Freebirth Society podcast. This is a radical space for women who are ready to celebrate their autonomous choices in birth, motherhood, and beyond. Together, we'll learn about wild birth through personal narrative, we'll explore the politics of birth, and we'll analyze everything that relates to our lives as women from a feminist perspective. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
What if I told you that there was an underground global community of badass women all swapping wisdom, witnessing and supporting each other in total reverence, and birthing their babes entirely outside of the medical system? What if I told you that there was a vetted, private, exclusive space where you could access my personal list of radical birth keepers? And what if I told you that it's off Facebook, it's troll-free, and where most of the women on this podcast are hanging out? If you're in alignment with what we talk about here on the podcast, it's a pretty sure bet that our private community wants you in it. We have 11 monthly circles and workshops virtually, and also have a member directory so that you can find women in your local community too. And this isn't just for mothers. This is for the wild-hearted, radical woman who is interested in consciousness raising, questioning the systems that harm us, living sovereign, holistic lifestyles, and wants to create community to guide our way back to healed sisterhood. Go to freebirthsociety.com and apply today. I'll see you in there. My brilliant friend Amy joins me this week on the show, sharing her 5 birth stories. Amy is full of rich insights about her journey through motherhood as a radical feminist. Amy speaks honestly about the victim consciousness she lived in and how she gave away her power time and time again. It was in learning to fully trust women and therefore herself that Amy was finally able to shed the last layers of doubt and internalized misogyny, which made way for her to claim her deepest desire, to give birth and catch her baby all on her own. Her psychedelic postpartum reminds us of the physiology of transformation inherent to birth and the pure bliss that we have access to when we are liberated as women. This is a really special episode. Enjoy.
Hi.
I'm so excited.
I know, me too.
I feel like I've been trying to get you to do this with me. How old is Gilda?
3 and
Okay, so for 3 years.
Yeah. And I've been like, maybe next.
Maybe. You're like, let me just move 7 more times.
Yeah, no, it's been a crazy, it's just, and now I'm like, it's time. We're not unpacked.
Love
we just
it.
got here, but I have a space.
I love it. Yeah, I'm really excited. I know bits and pieces, and you and I became friends. Well, I guess it was at the beginning of Gilda's pregnancy,
right
really,
at the beginning.
when we started talking. And so let's just kick it off wherever you want to start. Gilda was your 5th baby. So who are you? Gosh, how many years ago? How old is your oldest?
So my oldest turned 17 in less than a week.
Amazing.
And, I'm Amy, mother of 5. I've been pregnant 7 times, 2 miscarriages, and been married for almost 20 years. That's like mind blowing. My first son was born, I was 22. And yeah, his birth, this is actually really interesting. I didn't know anything about free birth. Back then it was called unassisted birth, I think due to Laura Shanley's book.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, I got pregnant accidentally in 2005. My boyfriend, now husband, and I were off and on. I was actually on my way to work at a farm in Maine when I found out I was pregnant. So came back to Texas, tried to, I didn't know anyone like in my peer group that had a baby. All the women that I knew that had children, even young children, were more like skewing toward my mom's friends, like women I loved, but not anyone that I could relate to. And so, but I just knew that I wasn't going to give birth on drugs. I don't know how. I look back at all these things and I feel so more than lucky, like blessed intuitively, like in a spiritual sense. Like I didn't circumcise him, all the things that could have happened because I was 22 and didn't know what I was doing with my life. I just knew certain things weren't going to happen. And I didn't, I actually didn't even have a computer. I didn't have the internet. This is like back in the dark ages.
Back in 1925.
Yeah. So I didn't, you know what I mean? It wasn't like now where
totally
you can research every decision for 3 weeks. It's like,
well, there's women free birthing off of hashtags, like meaning learning about free birth off of hashtags, like
right.
how amazing what's available today.
Right. No, and that's, I think, what helped me, or I know, was finding you. Well, anyway, we'll get there. So I was pregnant with Leigh, who was almost 17. And I went to my mom's OBGYN and it felt, I told her, I want a natural birth. And she's like, ha, 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 you don't have to do that. Like
silly girl.
Yeah. Why would you do that to yourself? And so then I was like, maybe I don't want like an OB. So then I found, we were, on, what is it, Medicaid then? So we just like didn't have any money. So I found a CPM, a CNM through like nurse midwife through the hospital. So that was really exciting. I think I was 6 or 7 months when I transferred care, but I'd probably only gone to 2 OB appointments. And then I found a doula through this nonprofit. And what's so interesting is I started reading like spiritual midwifery, which the pictures, I just want to frame all of them. The pictures are what blows me away about that book. And I asked my doula because I felt this really deep connection with her. She was probably like my age now, mid to late 30s. I'm 39. And I just felt this maternal, but not grandmotherly love. And she'd had 2 or 3 undrugged births and she had this great energy. And I actually asked her in this really naive way, 2005, 2006, could you just come to my apartment in Austin? And like, because I'd actually had a dream that she was there witnessing me. And she kind of cried and was like, I wish I could, but of course I can't, right? Isn't that interesting? I just hearken back to that all the time. Like that's what my soul wanted. I felt safe with her. I had this boyfriend. I'm like, that's enough. You know what I mean? But I ended up giving birth in the hospital. I feel like I got really lucky because I got there about an hour before Leith was born. All the things that needed to happen,
wow,
like happened, because I know hospital births, of course, can go really wrong. And just the older I get and the more birth stories I hear. And I was a conventional doula for a while, for 5 years maybe. And so I witnessed just a lot of abuse, like all of us who've been in that world have. I'm just like, oh my God, the stars just aligned for me not to experience explicit abuse and to be able to give birth undrugged. Like obviously it wasn't physiological, but I got there, I was in triage for a while. They're like, maybe you're not in labor. And my doula was like, she was great. She's like, of course you're in labor. Like, what's going on? Because I was, and they checked me. I was 4.
It's like, what else would it be?
Why am I acting
like what else is it?
Yeah. And my doula gave me, I've never used them in any other birth, but she gave me these combs. Have you heard of this? And you hold them. And I'm not sure it really did anything for me except the psychological feeling of, because I was tensing. And so I did this dance with these combs for about an hour before he emerged. So they like gave me a room, they checked me and they're like, you're only a 4. But this place, like at this point, I didn't care what 4. I was so on the birth journey that I didn't care about anything. I refused the gown. And the thing that I remember the most about this birth is, well, my husband actually got sick. Like he had to go. He was like throwing up.
Oh my
Not
God.
in front of me, but I think he was like, you know, a 21-year-old boy who's like, I don't know what's about to happen to my life. So he went white. So my doula actually went downstairs with him to like a bathroom to help him, which was great because I prefer to be alone anyway. And so that's just a funny part of the story is that
So
sometimes
like it was the fear, it was fear-induced sickness. He didn't have like a stomach bug?
no, oh no. And I wasn't even, there were no fluids. I wasn't naked. I was wearing like my civvies, like my street clothes. You know, there was no hospital-y. Yes, there was a hospital vibe, but I wasn't like in a gown, spread legged. Like I was standing up with these combs, and he just, I think he was just realizing in this sort of having like a psychic break, you know, like I'm about to become a father, and I'm really, you know, for women, it's like the whole 9 to 10 month journey. And for men, sometimes they're like, oh, this woman, this that I was dating for 2 years is crazy, and I don't, and now it's real. So I spent a lot of that birth alone prior to getting to the hospital at trying to think. I won't go into all the details. It was probably like a 14-hour process, just like quote unquote textbook, you know? And I was just alone for most of it, got to the hospital. My doula and Zach went away to deal with, you know, whatever was going on.
Psychic break.
The psychic break. Yeah. And so I had this nurse named Kim. This is another lucky thing where she's like supposed to be putting the whatever, the heart monitors on me. She's supposed to check me, yada, yada. And I remember she was like, just lay on the bed. All right, 7. You see what I'm talking about? Like, like she didn't, or she'd put the monitors on me and I'd push them away and she'd say, it looks great. Like she was just, I really still have a lot of love for her because she knew like this train is coming and we're just going to pretend like nobody else was in there. And then I started, my doula came back. I remember I held on to her at one point and said, actually, like, I was starting to kind of go out of my mind. And I was like, oh, I actually want like a C-section. This is in my mind. I was feeling like a train moving through my body. That's the, you know, I was 22, just that. I felt like I'd learned to ride the waves, and that's still my favorite part of the birth process. But whenever your baby's emerging, at least for me, I'm like, oh, there's no like, oh, like I'm surfing. It's like you surrender. And that's all. You know, and I remember that's what I said to my doula, Jackie. I said, something's changed. And so she got up and hugged me, and I bit her, but I still had the presence of mind not to like make her bleed. But I just remember feeling so animal, like holding on. And then I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And she's like, well, here we are. And I remember hoping, this is so psychotic, like something was wrong. I was like, hopefully something's wrong so they can just wheel me away and like knock me out.
Totally.
You know, it was just, I'd never felt that sensation. And so the CPM comes in, they try to get me on my back, you know, CNM, keep saying that. And also like 12 other people came in. I'm not even joking.
Yeah. And
I have friends that work in nursing and just in that industry, and I think they don't see undrugged births like at all.
No.
And so all these, it was like an avant-garde film, because I was actually in a pretty good mood. And I mean, of course, I would never want to have a birth like that again, but at the time it didn't disturb me because I was so like on my own drugs. I was just like, is this even happening? And they introduced themselves, I guess, trying to be respectful. And at this point, my waters had just like burst everywhere. And so I'm wearing like a little t-shirt, but my doula helped like take my pants off. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'm Amy, like nice to meet you. Just really trippy. I mean, you know, that's what happens in hospitals. And they're like, oh, I'm Joseph, I'm a resident. And I'm like, oh, hello. What? Just felt like a 60s avant-garde film. So they try multiple times to put me on my back, and I just can't do it. Like my body won't let me do it. So the CPM kind of like rolls her eyes and gets a footstool, like a janitor's footstool. And she's like, kind of has an attitude about it. Like, I'll just sit down here and like catch your baby. Because I really couldn't do it. They would have had to like abuse me, manhandle me. And so Lath emerged, and I just thought he was screaming. And I thought, like, I couldn't even wrap my mind around it being so young and having not planned. It's just like this purple screaming creature. I just couldn't believe he was mine. I was a little bit nervous. Like, I don't know how to make him be okay. Like he's this squirm, and he was very just like healthy and vibrant. And so they helped me to the bed. And the thing that I remember is when I was pregnant, I would sing the Joni Mitchell song to him. I am on a lonely road and I am traveling. And this is why you should not give birth with strangers. But I wanted to sing it to him, and I felt so embarrassed, but I did it anyway.
Oh.
And like the whole room got quiet and he stopped crying. And like I took my shirt off and I was able to like bring him to my body. And so that was that. But it's like I was a different woman. Like I was high for years after that birth. I'm not joking. You know what I mean? Like just the power. I loved every second truly of mothering him, being up late. When you have your first baby, you're like, what? I have to wake up all the time. Like your body is so not used to that. The teething, but I never felt prouder of anything in my life. And so like the sleep deprivation, and that I think hospital birth is so far from ideal. And I got really lucky in a lot of ways because I don't have any sort of like actually traumatic. I did have to fight for him to be in my room and all the bullshit, but it wasn't like anybody birth raped me. Well, I did get checked, but you understand what I'm saying.
It could have been worse, but I also heard you say they tried to force me onto my back several times.
Yeah, like, they tried to force me.
Maybe in any other circumstance, if it's just people tried to force me on my back, it's interesting.
Like the tolerance we have for birth in our culture,
and in a way, how we gaslight ourselves out of, like, because the spectrum is so bad.
Right.
You did get lucky. We both know you got lucky, and it was still. This is where I think a lot of women get, what's the right word? I don't know what the right word is. I don't know if it's confused or stuck or what. Like, it's complicated because, we hear this story and it's like, that was like pretty good for a hospital birth.
For like the center of abuse.
For the center of abuse. Yeah, it was like pretty good, thank God. And that high for years, and like that your body really did it in spite of all the disruption and meeting your baby. It's all just so complex at the center where abuse of mother babies, is
ritualized and inculcated into the whole thing. And maybe that was my point, is just that the spiritual high and like alchemization or transformation inherent in birth is so resilient.
Yeah.
That even then I was high for years. Yeah. You know what I mean? Just, and that's actually what I really took away from that birth, especially as I started to learn more about physiological birth, is that like women, we're given such a gift if we're willing to take it, because when you give birth undrugged as like the lowest baseline ever, I still felt like a different person. I never felt more powerful. I'd never felt more grateful. I just felt like the veil had been, like this curtain in my life had been moved, and I felt so purposeful.
And nursing a baby, like tending to a baby, nursing a baby, and as you said, really loving it is a pretty powerful transitional phase, in a woman's life.
And nobody told me. And that's the thing that, that's the greatest secret. Nobody told me. They were like, oh, breastfeeding's so hard, and like, you better get that epidural. There's no metal, and your life's never going to be the same. It's awful. And you're going to want to go back. I was like a college dropout. You're going to want to go back to school. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to do any of that. I had this baby. It's just like, I'm never leaving him. People don't like, what? Nobody told me. Nobody told me it'd be like this. So, my husband and I, we got pregnant again, and I gave birth to his brother Bela about 2 years later. We were living on a farm, and that was great because it was a home birth. The midwife was like an old country midwife. She didn't come again until about an hour before he emerged. But that birth, she thought I was hemorrhaging. So this whole, so he was born in like a little Target, like kiddie pool that didn't really get filled up all the way because it happened so quickly, so I'm like trying to get my yoni like, because I just had it in my mind that it would be better to give birth in water, like maybe it'd be less intense. So I'm literally like scissoring my legs and like, I'm just like, get the under the water, and it didn't, whatever. So that's sort of funny. I should have just given birth standing up, but I'd had like a fixation on water birth. So then after that, we moved to my bed, and Leif is there. It's like 10 p.m. He's 2, and it was really great. I had a close friend at the time, who was another homesteady kind of mom, who was there to kind of keep an eye on Leif in case, he was naked and like covered in stickers. She was really prepared to help him do whatever.
That's such a good idea, to just show up with a ton of stickers.
That's what she did.
That's cute.
2-year-olds are naked all the time, so
that's cute.
That's what I remember. But she, the midwife that I had hired at that time, was like, everybody leave the room, and she was like, you're hemorrhaging. So she gave me Pit and then Methergin.
Jeez.
Right. And then she actually said, it looks like a murder scene. There's blood everywhere.
Girl.
Yeah. And so I had, Maren Green talks about this. I remember, like, I found Indie Birth, I don't know when, 2010 or something, about how you sort of get like diagnosed and labeled. And so I had it in my mind, like, that was then one of my fears always around unassisted birth, is like, oh, I'm a bleeder.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I want to say actually too about Bela's pregnancy is that I bought Laura Shanley's book at this point. I was like getting into, I really, like, I was intrigued by the idea of unassisted family birth, but I also used my husband as like a prop to not get what I wanted. You know how women do that? Like it's like I wanted him to say no because I wasn't ready. So I'd say, oh, well, I love reading about all this, but like, Zach, as if I haven't always just done what I wanted. But it's so funny.
Well, I appreciate you owning it, because, I work with women every day around this issue. And yeah, women often use their husbands as a excuse for why they can't have what they want.
Right. Yeah. And I was totally doing that. And that was fine for me at that moment. I wasn't ready. And, but I was definitely like on the path. I still didn't know anyone that had kids my age, much less.
Crazy.
Just thought, how fringe can you get? Like, am I just so crazy?
You already birthed with a farm midwife.
Yeah. I'm like living in the middle of nowhere, like an hour and a half from a hospital. I'm like, now how crazy can you really get? This is 2008. So, and about the whole hemorrhaging thing, what's amazing to look back on is I felt great. So now understanding physiological birth is that like the reference for a woman bleeding too much is her. It's always her, right? I had energy. I was like looking at my 2-year-old son clearly. I was nursing my newborn, beautiful son. The energy in the room was so beautiful to me. Like, I was fine. I wasn't fine. She wasn't fine.
She was seeing you have some amount of blood loss, and she doesn't know anything about physiological third stage. And she had medical training that teaches her to untangle the mother from the blood loss, right? Which is the point you're making. And when you just see blood and you are medically trained to, to manage third stage, you get what you get. You get shot with pitch and you get Methergin.
Mm-hmm. And she told me the night or two after birth to wake up, or Zach to wake me up every few hours to give me Methergin under the tongue.
Whoa. So like, she was really freaked out.
Really wrapped up in this whole,
it could have had nothing to do with even what she thought about you at the birth. It could have been, because this is so common, the last birth she was at.
I never thought of that.
A woman, had some amount of blood and didn't feel good, and maybe she fainted, or maybe she, whatever.
Transfer, who knows, requested transfer.
And as soon, so many midwives bring their last births, their trauma, right, into the next one, and then it paints the next woman's birth, even when it has nothing to do with you.
Well, I walked away with the story that she saved my life somehow. I mean, I felt amazing. I remember
I'm not exactly. It's weird. I felt great, but also I was about to die.
I was on my deathbed nursing my newborn. Yeah, and I walked away with this dissonance, like
totally.
And I was 24. I like farmed up until, I was in such good shape. Like, not that you should do this, but my parents came I stayed up till 3 or 4 a.m. My parents came the next morning. I ran out to greet them. Not that you should ever do that. My point is, I wasn't about to die. I was not anemic. Everything was great. I was eating peanut butter toast and drinking apple juice when she's like, everybody clear the room. And I was like, wait, but why? Wow. And that's also, that gaslighting, whether it's intentional or not, is so fucked up. And and that's really like zooming out. It's just gaslighting of the mother's experience, and her experience should like take primacy. It should be the
right. But from the beginning, the whole dynamic is that she's in charge of you and the baby, right? So like the integrity is out the window as soon as we engage with
go in for the blood work and you go in for the this and that. Yeah.
It's totally confused. Like she believes, and to some degree you did, that her
oh
job,
absolutely.
Yeah, is to.
That's why I walked away being like, wow, she saved my life. And like, how confusing is that? Because I feel so athletic and awesome. And
it's so confusing.
Yeah, I'm like, that's what almost dying feels like and being anemic. Right? I'm not joking. Like, I was anemic briefly after a like later miscarriage I had in 2018. And like, that feels like you can't really walk upstairs without catching your breath. So that's actually real. And nobody can project that onto you that you've lost too much blood. So I had Noni, Eleonora, 2010. So just like 2 years. And her birth was actually one of the like, Bela's birth was pretty like easy and I was outside for most of it. But Noni's birth, it was just so beautiful. Like it was still a midwife attended, same deal, like only an hour or two. But I had the tub that I wanted, music playing. Like it was a little more, like I was more prepared to like set the stage. It was dark. She was born at 2 or 3 a.m. And it actually felt easy in my mind. And I had a really close friend there. I'd made friends with women by this point that also had children. Most of their children were a little younger than mine. But a friend of mine came to take photos. And what's so funny, when I saw the photos a few weeks later, I was like, the veins in my neck, I was clearly like yelling, but I had no memory of it because it just felt so, you know what I mean? I was like, that was so easy. And I look at the pictures, I was like, damn, I was working, you know?
Totally. I've projected that onto so many women I've served where I like join them and they're, they look like they're freaking out and they're puking and they're red and they're bulging and they're, all this stuff. And I'll be like, how's it going? And they're like, this is great.
Right.
I'm like, oh, it is. Okay, great. It's not what it looked like.
It's right. Yeah. And that's like, it was dark. And actually the midwife that I hired was a friend of mine. I was like in the doula world. This is so weird. Okay. So with Noni, it's not so weird. I'm sure this happens all the time. I was planning an unassisted birth at this point. And she was my friend. And I think I didn't start care with her till after 20 weeks. Actually, same with Bela, because we lived in Hawaii and I'm not a type A person. So it's not difficult for me to let go a little. You know what I mean? I'm not someone that's like, and I need the transvaginal ultrasound and I want all the blood work. Like it's just, even when I was in the medical paradigm, I was a little bit like, I mean, it's probably fine. So, yeah, I hired her because I remember she was like, you need a birth guardian to make sure you're safe, And again, I wasn't quite ready. Like I could put that off on her, but I was like, oh, that feels good, and I liked her a lot. And then actually I told her, I don't want any checks. I don't want any heart monitoring. And so she had me actually in labor in the birth process sign something that she wrote that basically was like, I'm declining all preventative. I don't know. And like, I won't sue you because I'm not having you do anything to me. And at the time,
I handled that earlier.
Yeah, right. But at the time, I remember thinking she was so like, this was like liberation. I was like, what an amazing midwife with so much integrity that like she would even let me decline.
It's so distorted on so many layers. It's such a good reminder of where a lot of people are at.
Yeah, like let me, like you still,
yeah.
As a grown woman, you think, oh, they're saying that I can say I don't want their hands in my body. Can you even believe that?
What an amazing person.
And again, it's not even like I was with her for a day. It's like, it was an hour or two before Noni was born. I'm like, how many times did these women just want to be putting, I mean, I sound a little bit like a jerk, but it's like, there's like a weird obsession there. Is it really that big of a deal? Can you just not put your hands in women's bodies for like an hour or two?
Turns out no.
No. And that's all I wanted. But because I got that, I do think her birth, Noni's, was just so beautiful. It just felt really magical and really peaceful. And it was like after she was born, I remember thinking that I could do it again. Whereas after Lates, I remember thinking, I will never do that again. That freight train going through your body.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I made it, but like, Lord. And then with Bela, I was like, okay. And with Noni, I remember thinking, oh my God, like my heart just opened. I just felt like and I don't know if it's because she was my first daughter. You know, I never had a desire for a certain sex, but it did feel really special to have a daughter after two boys. So trying to think, that was 2010, and I didn't have my fourth baby, Annie, who you know my girls, until 2016, late 2016. And Zach and I separated for a few years, and when we got back together, I really wanted to have another baby. And her birth, Anat, was like the whole catalyst for where I am now. And it's like, it was through her that I understood when you go into this tunnel, you go all the way down to depression, anxiety, traumatic birth, whatever. And you allow yourself to like be with it, like instead of like numbing out, drugging yourself. I trauma bonded for like a month or two after her birth. And then I was like, wait, but you could keep doing that if you weren't ready to go all the way down into the grief of it. You keep trauma bonding. It had to happen. Stockholm syndrome. So I hired the same midwife that I had with Noni. She was like my friend. But okay, before with Noni, she was not a mother yet. And so I think she came to births, or I know she did, with a lot less baggage. And she had two babies since then, and one was born in a hospital. And I think the first one was almost transfer. So she developed this in the medical midwife world. She was sort of known as being laid back when I first hired her. 6 years later, she like wore scrubs now and was like, yeah. And there were no gloves with Noni, as far as I can remember. She was like gloved, friends with doctors, all about, you never know when anyone's going to need a transfer. You have to have great relationships with all that. It was like, and I knew I shouldn't hire her because almost every prenatal appointment, I would walk away feeling really awful about myself. Like, because I would say things like, at this point, I knew more about, I think I'd found Indie Birth. I think I'd found Yolanda. 2016. I don't think, were you doing anything yet? Was it 2017? Maybe you were like, right. I found you like in the midst of my trauma grief. And that's when like all this stuff was literally starting to come online, but I told her like, I want you there, but I don't want anyone to touch my baby immediately postpartum. Like, it's like, I was starting to know more about what I wanted as like a female animal. I don't want my baby passed around. I don't want the sort of typical metric that you do to measure a baby's health. I don't want that done for a few hours or even the next day. I had this whole sense of what I wanted. And she would say things like, that's very romantic, but you never, that's right. It became this very fucked up. But because I'd had this really great experience with her and we ran in the same circle, I couldn't untangle my past experience with the gut feelings that were like, don't do it. So we get later and later into my pregnancy, and she's palpating. She's like, oh no, your baby's breech. Oh, now your baby's transverse. Oh, I started bleeding at 14 weeks. She's like, you have placenta previa. It was highly medicalized as far as and so I had all these ultrasounds. I'd usually only had like maybe one per pregnancy. I was completely spinning out, and I was like allowing it to happen. I was put on bed rest, all this shit, told not to have sex, told not to masturbate. No, really. And I think Yolanda I don't know if it was like in her group or publicly, she said something about that even as a kind of abuse sexually, to like even talk to women about not only their sex lives, but like, don't touch yourself. What the fuck? Like, you're gonna kill your baby, right? If you have an orgasm.
It's so insane. It's so stupid.
It's really stupid. It's so stupid. Thank you.
It's so painfully stupid. Oh
right.
God. But I mean, it really is like if we give them an inch, they take a mile,
I did. I kept going. Oh my God. Oh my baby. Oh, I'm bleeding. Like, I went with the drama, the damsel archetype. I played it all. Oh, now my husband has to take off work because I have to have bed rest and get really fat and whatever. Like I just lay in my bed and I don't do anything now because I'm bleeding.
And you're certainly not laying around masturbating.
No, yeah, nothing fun. Just like eating tacos and like, oh, also, this is where the spiritual kind of psychic, she told me, okay, so I'd always had a lot of textbook experiences where I'd be nauseated, throw up, 12, 13 weeks hit, I wake up, I'm a new woman. So I remember throwing up a lot during Anat's pregnancy in the beginning. And I said something again at a prenatal appointment offhand, like, whoo, can't wait till I hit that second trimester. And she was like, well, with all my babies, I threw up constantly and had hyperemesis, gravid, whatever.
Yeah.
So you might too. And then guess what happened?
Ew.
I threw up so much that I had like vitamin deficiencies.
She put a spell on you.
And I was like open. I was like, put all the spells on me. Like, I want to be a sick person.
No.
I mean, not consciously. Right?
At least you can own this shit, because I think this about so many women. I'm like, yes, you just want to be a sick person. You just want
no, I wanted all the attention and the drama.
Yeah.
Pregnancy so hard. And I don't know why I was available for that. Maybe our past friendship. I really don't know.
Right. I don't even know if the why like matters.
It doesn't matter, but I was totally available for that. And I remember being like, how uncanny, she said that and now it's all true. And like just thinking, I don't really believe in that spiritual stuff. What a coincidence. But like I'm like allowing this woman into the psychic veil of my station, and she's the like primary person speaking into my life, and she's like not right. She's not okay.
Yeah.
Right. She's addicted to her own like victim consciousness. My body doesn't work. No one's bodies work. So I was like, oh yeah, you should like escort me down this path.
I mean, that just so perfectly articulates what so many midwives do.
Like they just like vomit their own trauma all over.
Yeah, and escort more women down this dark, broken, misogynistic path.
Because they need to be a hero. And looking back now, because we were friends for a handful of years, now I can see it all. We'd go out to get margaritas and talk, and a birth story after birth story. I remember when I was pregnant with Anata, actually, we were at a Mexican restaurant with a group of our friends, and I kind of checked out because she was talking about another woman bleeding out, and I have one phone to call 911 and one hand in her body. But I couldn't see it then. I just thought she's a great midwife, but I was starting to be like, I don't want to hear these stories. And even if they were true, it's like I could at least see this is really insensitive. Why are you? I'm like 7 months pregnant here. Could you not?
My God.
So then I go, she starts talking to me about C-sections. You've had all these babies and pregnancies. Your uterus is like weak and big and floppy. That's why your baby is.
Whoa.
Yeah. You should get one of those. What are those things? The belt to hold your uterus because it's lost all its strength. Like as if I'd had 15 children, which that's fine if you've had 15 children. I'd had 3. So let's just calm down. Like
crazy.
And so yeah, she would palpate me, and I got really obsessed and neurotic about that too. Like, oh no, now my baby's transverse, now my baby's breech, now my baby's like occipital, And so she'd say, you need to call your parents and prepare for a C-section, like your parents, so they could watch my other 3 children.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because like, babies can't come out this way. And I was like 36 weeks pregnant.
Right. You still have like a whole nother month of
the whole thing was like a spell. It was a whole. So I go into the birth process at like 41 weeks, present with waters releasing.
Wait, so she's like set up your C-section and you're like, okay, or you're like, no?
Well, she meant like, I'll come to your house, and if your baby is still not in a good position, we're going to have to go.
Prepare for it, she's saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, everything's so fucked up, and I was still vomiting. So I was like available for all of this. But I go, like I had an ultrasound at 40 weeks and a few days because she's like, we need to make sure your placenta is blah, blah, blah. We didn't have a lot of money then. Everything was out of pocket. I paid $250 for an ultrasound. And the tech is like, I can't see anything. Like, you're like about to have a baby. How could I see your placenta? And I remember being so mad that I just like threw away this money. The whole thing was a shit show. And I totally own my part in it, that I was just like a chicken with my head cut off. Like, you want me to go get an ultrasound when I'm like huge and about to have, I'll do it. Like, I'll do whatever. So I was really like codependent with her, and she came to my house. the birth went just as most of my other births had. Like you surf the waves, the rushes. But I was really in my head. I didn't know why I couldn't get out of it. We'll just put that there. I wonder why. But I remember thinking, this doesn't feel right. Not in my body, but like I don't feel any of the good feelings. I feel just bad. Not even like pain, just like I feel cranky. I feel like everything's annoying me. I hate this. Instead of just where you are in the process. And she came about literally 15 minutes before Anat was born. And Laith actually called because I was like, it was happening. Zach was with me. I was in the tub, in my bedroom, just a blow up tub. And Zach's like, I'll go call her. And I was like, no, zoomed in on him. And so Laith called her. She and her assistant come in. And this is like a thing I spent years unpacking. She came in, and actually Sister Morningstar did her newborn. I mean, that was just this full circle thing for me. I met her naked in the bathroom one early morning and at the festival. And
wait, you met Sister Morningstar naked at the bathhouse at my
last summer at your
my
festival.
house, at my land. Okay.
Yes.
Love that. Wait, were you naked or was she naked?
I was. Don't want to throw any shade on her. I'll own my nakedness. But I wanted to tell her thank you because I'd heard her speak on your podcast while I was dealing with this trauma about newborn first breaths. And I told her that. And then she was like, will you come tell your story in a circle? And I'll ask Emily if I can do a teaching on newborn first breaths. And I couldn't believe, I was just like, life is so beautiful. Aww. And Annie was with me. And I was like going through the trauma of my birth story. And she was like, it's not your fault. And like, I was crying and Annie was just like eating pistachios next to me and drawing. And if you would have told me in 2016, after this fucked up birth, fast forward to 2022, that I would like meet Sister Morningstar and get to be held in a circle of women, I'm getting chills. I just thought, when you like say yes to things, like when you drive your kids for 20 hours.
Yeah, I also like love/hate that I had no idea that happened.
No, it was, well, you knew about the newborn first breaths, but it was like, I didn't want to be too fangirly, but early in the morning, we just started chatting and I just was like, thank you. Yeah. And she's like, I want to tell your story and I can teach about it because that's, one of her main passions. So anyhow, they come in, I'm pushing and I say, something's wrong to my midwife. Because I felt like she was like being held up by like a bungee cord or something. Like it's like I push, she'd go back in, push. Didn't feel like normal crowning. I don't even know that it matters what was happening. The point is, she went in, found like a double or triple nuclear cord. I remember like holding onto her bra strap because it hurt so badly. And she's like trying to move Anat around inside. And I felt like I was going to throw up. Anat comes out. Totally white, gray, like not looking good. She cuts the cord immediately. We'll just take a pause for that. And then I remember like, I was so shocked by everything happening. I could see my baby like floating in the water. And I remember saying, help me, someone help me. Like I couldn't even get her. It was like I was frozen, probably from all that in my body. And so then the midwife that I'd hired did mouth to mouth. And I remember it became very trippy. Like she was calling time. And I think it went up to like 4 minutes. And, cause I requested the whatever afterwards. I can't think of the word right now. Like she mailed it to me, whatever midwives have to keep, the work for the state, the
records.
The records. Thank you. That's it.
So she showed up just in time to ruin your birth.
Right. And what I talked about Sister Morningstar, she's like, she was just doing her job. Like you said something's wrong, asking her. And she wasn't blaming me, but it was this really beautiful nuance of like, that's kind of, it took me a few years to own my co-creation of it in all these different ways and not just spend all my energy demonizing someone that works for the state.
Right. Cause it's like,
what are you going to get?
Where women say something's wrong.
But you're a traditional birth teacher.
But it wouldn't be like, oh,
you might say, I don't know what you would say, but you might not say anything. You might say, what do you mean? You might not, you stick your hand right in her yoni. Right. So, so that's what Sister Morningstar was saying in a much more eloquent way. It was just like, not like you asked for it, but like her like triggers, I don't mean trigger in the woke way, but like her trigger as a state midwife is something's wrong. Here we go.
She's been excited about that from the moment you hired her.
Perfectly said. Yeah. So that's what she wanted. And I knew that somewhere. I knew so, Anat starts breathing and she has a really low APGAR, like 1 or whatever. But what's interesting is I was never afraid, because even though she wasn't really doing anything, her heart rate was very low. I could see her like grimacing, how babies do. So I knew she was alive. And that was like enough for me. Like, I think if I'd been alone and that happened, I really don't remember fear, except I remember the tension in the room. But I was looking at my baby when I finally got to hold her. She was grimacing. Then the midwife I hired took her, did mouth to mouth, all this other stuff, the board that they do.
Also, like, it wouldn't have likely happened had she not been abused upon emergence.
And the cord cut. Because
yeah,
exactly. And because what I've come to think anyway, because we can only theorize at this point, is that she had a shorter cord multiple times wrapped around. And so what I was feeling was like some resistance, which would have worked itself out in the end. And that's what the cord is for.
Right.
So even if she'd come out limp, gray, white, and that's why Sister Morningstar's newborn, first breaths, her whole thing, I needed to unpack. It was important for me to know, could I have helped my baby? And when I heard her podcast that she did with you, where she just kind of mentioned newborn first breaths for a little bit, and the importance of the halo around the mother, 3 feet, 6 feet, whatever it was. I mean, that was the first step in my healing. I was really broken for a long time. I've never been on any pharmaceuticals. I was on Zoloft for almost 2 months. I was not, after that birth, I was so messed up. Like, I was like losing touch with reality. Also, like my 2-week postpartum period, the midwife said, if you'd gone through with your unassisted birth, we would be at a funeral right now instead of coming. Right.
How dare she?
And I was messed up at this point. Like,
Whoa.
my eyes were bloodshot, not like a normal 2-week postpartum woman. Like, I looked like a zombie. I wasn't eating. I had raging insomnia. Like, Zach didn't know if he should call someone to, like, he was afraid, as a man, he was like, is my wife insane? My mom was afraid. My mom even asked me, are you going to hurt your children? Which felt so like, of course not. But it's like, people could see that I was not okay for a few months after the birth, like acutely not okay. And then I remember thinking, I didn't have a transfer. I wasn't drugged. I didn't have a C-section. I got my home birth. Like, I'm just too sensitive. You know what I mean?
Just an ungrateful.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I didn't understand. I was like, shouldn't I have had just this, like, the most awful, like, general anesthesia C-section to be so fucked up like this?
This is what I mean. The ways that we gaslight ourselves about our own trauma. It's just wild.
So that went on, but that was like, that's what I mean by going into the dark, like all the way down. What do you really want? And then I was able to look back at the kind of signposts along the way for Anat's pregnancy. And I had little selfies, like not selfies, but a picture I might take with my tea, with my Laura Shanley book, and all these other beautiful books that I'd found along the way of women. Freebirth wasn't quite in the consciousness yet. I know Janine Parvati Baker came up with it, but it wasn't quite the, it was like DIY or family or like,
it wasn't a term.
It wasn't a term. And I'd collected, and I remember thinking so clearly about a year postpartum with Anat, how in the hell did I think I was on the road toward a free birth? Like, in a really good come to Jesus way with myself, like everything I did was in full opposition to what I said I wanted, and not in like a shame ride or like, but just like how disconnected we can be from reality. Every single thing,
There's a line that I work with in the tools that this is making me think of. It's we can see what we are committed to by looking at the results in our life. And it can be pretty gut punchy. I mean, it usually is, although it can be positive things too, but whatever is the result. So whatever is happening tracks, if we're willing to track to how it reveals what we were committed to get that result. And like I said, sometimes it can be wonderful things too, but usually when I've done it, it's to look at results that I'm not stoked on.
And you're not ready to own. You're like, oh, these things are happening to me. And then you're like, wait a second.
Oh, wow. I'm totally committed to that. Yeah.
And I was committed to being in this super weird relationship with this midwife and having her, and actually met her a year postpartum to debrief Anat's birth because I was still not sleeping. I was still,
Wow.
and she broke it down for me. You know what? I was still trauma bonded to her. I remember texting her 4 or 5 days postpartum. Thank God for badass, amazing midwives to save, you know, all this.
Yeah.
And then the 2 weeks postpartum, oh, we'd be at a funeral right now.
Oh my God.
You hadn't called me. So I had a lot of guilt, like that I was so selfish. I almost killed my baby, you know? And but I knew it wasn't true, which is why I was like a detective. I was like, who's going to explain this to me? Googling everything. Did she come out limp? What could have happened? What? And then when I heard,
And what did the midwife do that you wouldn't have done better?
I'd stick her hand up there and do all kinds of crazy stuff, cut the
Oh,
cord and do,
okay.
yeah. And then I get to do mouth to mouth with a cut cord. But anyway.
Right. It's just so objectively false. It's so objectively false, but it's really making me think about, you know, kind of like the dark spiritual context of this whole thing, because it's kind of interesting because this week in school, in the RBK school that I'm currently in, this week is all about birth work as shamanism. And that's the whole teachings of this week.
And it can be dark.
Really wrapping, you know, beginning at least to begin the conversation of this shamanism that is within birth attending, and you can use it, you know, for good, and you can use it for dark, and there's just so much to say about that, but just like how
dark magic.
Yeah, for real.
And I like made a sort of contract with her without actually being aware. And in a sense, I guess when we invite anyone to our birth, we're making at least a short-term contract with them spiritually to witness us or sabotage or whatever role they want us to play, if we're willing to play it, which I was willing to play the damsel so that she could be the hero and she could and actually I was like a longtime TERF, and you know, it's like I found second wave literature after I gave birth to my first daughter in 2011. And so when all the trans stuff was happening, I was just like, hopefully this won't be that big of a deal.
Hopefully this will just breeze on over.
Yeah, I'm like, this is really fucked up and weird. All these bathrooms and like now all the AGPs, you know, I was just like, hopefully, I remember talking to my mom about it. And I was like, I don't want to lose all my friends and like say how I really feel, but I don't think any of my friends even know about this. So hopefully it just goes away. That was like 2000.
Dad, what's AGP?
Autogynephilia.
Oh, okay.
Men who are aroused by all the guys. Yeah. Who are like, I'm actually a woman and it gets me off to think that.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, that used to be like niche, you know. Now it's really popular.
It's not niche. Now it's niche to say women give birth.
Who knew in a decade?
Who knew?
A lot of radical feminists knew. I did not know.
Yeah,
I just was like, hopefully I can just not talk about this too much, and all these clearly sick men will just go under the radar.
Cue the literally right now. Cue the couple hundred people that are going to iTunes to leave the review on this podcast that they can't believe that I had a TERF on this podcast. That this hates literal violence.
Just tell, yeah. Which it actually is relevant because I found Yolanda. I'd already found Indie Birth, but I'd read something that Marin had written like back in 2008 about, which I don't know if she still feels this way, but just about the role of, she's talking about the goddess Bridget, and the role of a midwife is really not to really be there, and that she tried to stay 10 feet away from women giving birth and not be in the photos.
Like that's currently the
no. But I knew that was the first like essay I read just in the wild west of the internet, where I was like, I knew I wasn't crazy. A real midwife doesn't want to be in your photos. A real midwife doesn't want to touch your baby. A real midwife prays to the goddess Bridget. A real midwife, like I was, you know, I was like, I remember being in bed, laptop like on my pillow, really messed up postpartum, and I found this little essay on the internet. And I was just
I love this too, because we just named for this year, we're doing all goddess themes at the festival, and we just named the bathhouse where you were naked and met Sister Morningstar, Bridget's bathhouse.
That's Gilda's, that's one of her middle names, by the way.
Oh,
so important to me. Yeah, I love that. So
you're getting vindicated.
And then these things, it's just like, then you're pregnant, right? With Suni, or maybe about to be. I don't know when you started your Instagram. Were you pregnant yet?
I launched the podcast right when I conceived.
Okay, so that's what I remember. So I found, it's so funny looking back because you were obviously just so unfamiliar to me then. And then I found, oh, here are these like women in Canada. They're seem like they're kind of turfy. That's cool. And they're talking about autonomous birth. Like it all started to come together in a way that like I just didn't feel like I was finding books published in the 70s. And then all my crunchy home birth friends were like, Amy, moms and babies die. Do you understand that? Almost like a religious, like, why do you have these books on your bookshelf?
Whoa.
All my like non-vaxxing friends, home birth. That was
Snooze.
like, yeah, I was like, too far out, whatever. Like, then there was shame. It's like a religious, almost like you want to kill your baby or yourself, and leave your children. And I was like, oh, I guess I don't. I didn't know. Like, very religious. So I found all this and I started to know, like, I'm going to have another baby and I'm not, like, I still hadn't like unpacked what had happened. I didn't know if Anat would have died. I didn't know. And still, who knows any of it, but I still didn't know. I was still healing. But in 2018, I went to Nova Scotia for a women's summit with Kate Varsava and Mata Panachi and I don't think Yolanda was not there, but it was like kind of her community at the time. And there was only one other American there. Like I almost felt embarrassed. Like I'd worked so hard with my 1-year-old Anat and Noni was 7. And I like saved up my money. I flew from Virginia. We were in Virginia at the time. And I was just like, I have to be here. And it was mostly local women. So they were like, whoa, you just, went through customs and all that. And I was like, yeah, I need this. I need this medicine. And I remember there was a traditional midwife there who never had her shirt on the whole time and was like smoking cigarettes and was so amazing in this kind of archetypal way. I don't know her. I'm sure women in that community know who I'm talking about. I remember one time, because you know how a lot of these gatherings can almost get like just so spiritual. And at one point they were, I don't know if she was just in a bad mood. I just liked her. She was like laying back in a yurt listening to something and people were just going on. She was like, I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I eat Doritos and even yell at my husband. And I remember being like, yeah, sometimes. I mean, I don't like Doritos, but like I get what you're throwing down. Like I like French fries sometimes. So she just had this irreverent spirit. And she was like taking a smoke break. And I just felt led to go talk to her about this kind of dark magic that we're talking about. And I told her, I said, I've never had a birth without a licensed midwife. She goes, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that great?
Just like my spirit animal.
Yeah, she's like, man, like you're missing out. Almost like if you said, like, I never have had chocolate cake. She's just like, ooh, I don't know why you want to go through your life like that.
Yeah, totally.
Like, yeah, it is a bummer.
Yeah.
I just felt so validated. And I told her what happened. And I said, I was still like in a blaming mode. Like I can't remember what I said exactly. Something like I was starting to get into the spiritual layers of it. I said something like, she put a spell on my birth, or she made it the way it was. Everything she said came true. And she said, no, you did, by inviting her there. Mm-hmm. And that was like the medicine. I remember that moment. She wasn't going to do that with me. What a bad midwife. And she cursed you. She's like, you cursed your birth. Why'd you invite her into it?
Yeah.
Just in that same.
Where are you in all of this?
I remember I didn't say anything. Like my feelings weren't hurt. I just had never tapped into my own power, really.
Yeah.
Like, oh, so there is spell work happening. And I made this subconscious to me contract to say, you're going to escort me down this super dark, broken path where you get to be the hero and I just get to be fucked up for a few years.
To prove something to yourself that you believe about yourself that you picked up along the way.
That I picked up. And it was like a Dom situation. I think now looking back, because all of my births had been complication free. Like people would do that thing they do where they're like, your births were so easy, and I was just I had like this vibrancy and I was like, I want to just only be the one to touch my baby. I think she had trauma and wanted to like
dominate you. Yeah.
Dominate me.
Yes.
And say like, you're not going to be this vibrant, whether or not she knew it. You're not going to be vibrant and happy and have 4 kids and be the only one to touch your baby because life is hard. Like
it's very unlikely that she's like thinking this stuff.
No, she's not aware.
Yeah. That's not, likely to be how it is. Yeah. But like she probably thought on some degree that you were, too lucky and needed to be put in your place.
By the like dark gods of ritualistic
Yeah. And jealousy and trauma combo, you know, is pretty dark shit.
Yeah. And I was just this like naive damsel that was like, oh, I guess I am really sick. Like you said, like I had a belief.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was so lucky with my 3 babies. And now, so 2018, that happens. I get pregnant accidentally. And I'd already had a miscarriage a long time ago. And it was like a 6-week, and it, you know, I didn't go to anyone. It just happened. And this one, actually, I feel like prepared me for free birth. It was maybe a 12, 13, 14 week. I don't remember exactly now. And I was like very well versed on your podcast at this point. This was 2018. And it was really intense miscarriage. Like I bled and bled and bled. It went on for a few weeks. And you know, I could see myself being tempted to like medicalize myself. But instead, I just read things online where one was like, I passed out during a miscarriage and my husband gave me peanut butter and it was fine. And I was like, oh, okay. It was kind of, I guess now that I'm saying it loud, touching the point of like the bleeder, the hemorrhage. And it was very much like a birth process. Like it would start up every night. I would be up all night. It'd take a break during the day. And it went off and on like that. And I actually did get blood work done, which I wouldn't do now. Maybe a month after, and I was anemic, and they were like, you could have a blood transfusion. And thank God I was like, I'll just eat liver. I remember I called my mom. She's like, we used to eat liver growing up. I only cooked it once. And I was like, oh, I'll buy some pills. But not to diss on liver. I know people love it. And I've mixed it with ground beef for meatballs. But that whole thing was like the first time I'd ever been initiated into actually trusting my body, going through something that I couldn't see the end of. And not thinking, oh my God, I need a DNC and like I'm broken.
Right. Like choosing not to dramatize it.
I didn't. And I kept it really private because even the few people I did tell were like just ready to run with it. And so then that also taught me a lot about the privacy.
And just like with birth, no one knows anything about miscarriage, you know, like women don't know that weeks of bleeding is totally common. You know,
that's why these weird Reddit threads or whatever, I don't even know if it was Reddit, helped me. Because it's like, and then 2 weeks later, I passed this huge clot and I thought I was done bleeding. I'm like, oh, there's no linear. And actually, I was about to go get an ultrasound like week 4. Zach came home from work to watch the kids. I remember I had jeans on. And right when I was walking out the door into my jeans, all the remainder of the tissue came out. And I was like, see, so it like, so I didn't go. Do you know what I mean? But it's like, if you would have just waited, it's all gonna pass. And like I knew just intuitively there's no more. And then, you know, I was able to kind of nurture myself, and a close friend of mine flew in and made me like this beautiful stew of sweet potatoes and like bone marrow, I don't even know what. And and actually when I was bleeding very heavily, just laying in my bed one night, I saw like a vision of a child playing in the woods. And I knew that it was my baby. So it's like even the sadness that often accompanies miscarriage, to me, it just felt like he or she doesn't want to come yet. It's not the right time. So then I didn't get a normal cycle back for like 6 months. And that was just another, like I tried to throw all these herbs at it and call these herbalist friends. Then I got diarrhea because I was like taking too many herbs.
Poisoning myself.
Yeah. With like 7 different like female herbs. And then I talked to a friend who was like, oh, I didn't get a cycle back for about 6 months. Not back, but it was just weird. And I don't know if they were anovulatory. So that was again this moment of deepening into like, okay, well, maybe I'm going to spot, like, I don't need to go to like, I'm an old 35-year-old now. And like, I'm infertile, or this miscarriage really screwed me up. Just this, like, it's not time for me to get pregnant right now. And like, what if I'm just okay with what's happening? And that had never been, I was always like, I can fix everything in my body. And so I did conceive Gilda in January of 2019, and I joined the membership probably right around that time. And she was intentionally conceived. And I was so excited because I knew like no one's coming into this space. Like I'm just going to give birth the way I want. I was just full of excitement, like no fear, because I knew that it was my birthright, kind of like that midwife saying like, what a bummer. You know, I was like, well, I'm doing this. Like, I'm just going to, it was an intentional pregnancy. And, but shortly thereafter, we'd had some flooding in our house. There were hurricanes in Virginia on our farm. We had mold issues. Zach and I were actually living apart because he wasn't working remotely, and I just was like really jumping the gun wanting to live on land. So he was living in DC in an apartment working, and I was living with the kids in Floyd out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains of Virginia, which I thought would be really fun. And it was really hard to do that alone. But so basically we figured out the extent of our mold stuff. We'd taken out like a $30,000 loan to fix it. It still wasn't fixed. And I remember one night, and I was newly pregnant with Gilda, and Zach was like, y'all got to move back up and we need to sell this. Like, we can't do this anymore. You know, like this isn't, and I was so relieved to hear him say that, because I was like, I wanted to be tough and like keep my land, and like, I can live alone until you work remotely. And just to hear him say, this is a little crazy. But that is where we had to get rid of almost everything we owned because of all the mold. And, you know, I don't know exactly what I think about all that anymore, but that's just where I was. And we rented a house in West Virginia, which is like as close as we could afford at this point, because we're like paying mold stuff and trying to fix up this house and renting a house. So Zach commuted every day about 4 hours, like an hour and a half or two there and back. So I was kind of alone. He was tired, and we just didn't have anything. And that's when I called you. I was about 9 weeks pregnant, and I was just like, I can't have this baby. Like, my life just completely blew up. Yeah, I was like, I don't want to give birth alone in this little town that I don't like, and I don't know anybody, and I don't have anything in my house. And I just felt really broken. Like, and so I was like, I'm going to have an abortion. And that's when you and I started talking. And I actually went, yeah, I just felt like I can do this. Like, I can just be really rational. I'll get pregnant another time. But I remember going to Planned Parenthood, and they do the ultrasound or whatever, because I knew I was like 10 weeks to the day. And I think that's their cutoff for the oral, like, abortion pills. And I remember the woman was like, whoa, you are 10 weeks to the day, whatever that means. But she was like, you really know your body. And I was like, yeah, I do. I know how pregnant I am. And but my mind was racing sitting there in that clinic. Like, I just was like, how am I supposed to know what the right thing is? Like, I couldn't find my inner voice. And I just felt like I was going crazy. And they walked in to give me a RhoGAM shot. I'm Rh negative and whatever. And I remember I knew that I never wanted to have a RhoGAM shot, like, because of my baby, like during pregnancy. I'd had them, I won't go into that, but I'd had them after birth. And I just had this full maternal protective instinct when they came. And then I knew, like, oh, I want to keep moving. Otherwise I wouldn't, like, I wasn't thinking about myself at that point. I wasn't totally woken up to all of this, the injection and the pharmaceuticals, but I knew I didn't want my baby to be exposed to that in the womb. And I remember this voice in my head said, you can leave the way that you came. You can just leave pregnant. You can just get in your car and just figure this out. And that's when you and I, you know, I talked to you, and I remember I was like, well, there is an office that Zach could transfer to in Austin. My mom had gotten really sick at this point, and I wanted to be with her. I just felt so disenfranchised out in this little West Virginia town. I was like, what am I doing? And we have a lease. I remember I said, I'm just really stuck here. And you said, you're not stuck, you're thinking stuck. And I was like, So I just chewed on that.
Yeah.
So I talked to Zach, and
as stuck as you want to be.
Right. And,
right.
And he'd said, you know, I was like, could you please ask if you can transfer to Austin? They have this big office there, because I want to be with my family, and what is even happening here? Like, I'm done with this part of the country, and I don't want to be alone. And there was this wilderness school that my older kids had gone to when they were young. I'm like, I want them to go to that wilderness school in Austin. Like, I just want to feel like my life makes sense again. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have this baby. I'd already decided at this point. And so I was like allowing myself through our conversations, like, I can dream about the pregnancy I want to have. And people break leases. Of course, you know, our landlord didn't care.
Yeah, I love
paid
it.
him the deposit, or let him keep the deposit. I'm like, oh, we had the money to move because we'd gotten a tax return. It was just all working. So it was like, yeah, you're stuck as you want to be. And I was like totally blissed out. I was just like, we're moving back to Austin. We were living with my parents for a little while, and we just like couldn't find a rent house. And what was so beautiful about my pregnancy with Gilda is I was really rooted in trusting life, because the old me, which I still deal with from time to time is like hyper vigilant managing. Okay, who's going to rent with 4 kids and 3 dogs and a cat, and Austin's expensive, and we've, it's been 6 weeks that we're living with my parents and nobody's, and I just didn't. Also, we were still having to sell this farm, which we were getting kind of poor paying for this farm, and I knew it was all going to work out. And we got this great rent house that's like its own story. It's just everything during her pregnancy. It was like the carpet was being rolled out. We had this really cute house on the green belt. I mean, it was just, I felt so at home there. We moved in. I did this full moon spell with Noni to sell our land in Virginia because I'd realized that I was still like tethered. So I did like a cord cutting spell, and it was really difficult to do, actually, like to envision other people on it. I realized I was spiritually like protecting the land, like it was still mine. It was hard for me to look at the listing photos. Like I would get really emotional, and I was like, I gotta get that money. We got to cut the cord here. And I remember, and Zach, I mean, now he's such a like believer in like the women's arts, but back then he's like a scientist, he like taught science for a long time, or for a handful of years in high school. So he's like, I mean, do whatever you want, but like whatever. So I did the spell with Noni. We got like 3 offers. One of them was a cash offer. We'd seen nothing for like 2 or 3 months. Zach was like, all right, but I knew that it was actually less about what I'm doing ritualistically, and like I had a heart shift where I was like, this is not my land. So I'd start speaking about it as if it was someone else's land. Like I had to. So yeah, her pregnancy was just really fun. Which is weird because my mom was dying, and I was walking her to her death. But I had this internal peace. I also bled. I remember feeling so clearly that all the lessons or some of the lessons anyway, that I had been given during Anat's pregnancy were like coming back up for me. Like I started spotting around 25 weeks. Then I would actually start bleeding. And I knew it was because of stress. I would have like rushes, surges that if you time them, I remember we were living with my parents when I was very stressed out. My dad was really angry. My mom was so sick. And I knew that's why I was having these sensations. And I went into the closet and had like 2 shots of whiskey, just from reading spiritual midwifery. But I was like, if they found me, they'd think I'm like a closet alcoholic. But I didn't want to tell them.
You were literally a closet alcoholic.
Yeah. They'd be like, Amy's been drinking this whole pregnancy, like we have to get her help. I remember being in there and just being like, I'm just going to take 2 shots of whiskey, took a glass of raw milk upstairs, and I'm going to get in bed. I'm going to talk to my baby. If anyone sees me doing this, they're going to think that I'm like a closet drinker. And so, but even that, it's like I didn't call, I had, just from being in the birth world, it's like I had numbers of midwives, and I remember so many times pulling up my phone when I was bleeding or having like early surges and being like, I could call. I'm not going to. You know what I mean? It was just
I'm going to drink whiskey instead.
I'm going to drink whiskey and get in. I was just like, there were all these opportunities that I could have played the drama game again by involving people that are part of that system. And it was really beautiful, because as painful as it was at times to walk through this, I remember I would have little mantras like, I can always get outside help if I think I need it. But today is not that day. I check in with my baby. With bleeding, I'd be like, what is it going to give me? Do I have placenta previa? I can always get an ultrasound if I want to, but I don't want to today. Just this very like non-dogmatic, do you want to go to the hospital? No. You always can. You can. That's always available. And I really needed that sort of self-talk with the different kind of complications coming up, which were not complications at all. And I took a bath with my baby every night at this beautiful bathtub in Austin, and I was just really connected to her, and I didn't know her sex or anything like that. But and I think I stopped talking to my brother and my dad like the last 6 weeks of my pregnancy. Not like they're toxic or terrible, but they were just like, what you're doing is so crazy. And I just like, I'm not going to answer the phone. And I swam. I just lived on like bacon and eggs. I don't think I'd ever really nourished myself in that way. I would see photos of me where I had like a really obvious double chin. I just didn't even care. It's like all the ways that I'd put myself like in a straitjacket as a woman. I was like, I am this beautiful, bountiful goddess. I don't care if people think I look fat. I'm not weighing myself. I don't do blood pressure. I just felt like I eat what I want to eat. I go hiking, I go swimming. If I bleed, I talk to my baby. Like, it was amazing. I'd never been that like in the flow of life. And so I think around 41 weeks, on a Saturday, we went to Kirby Lane and had like this huge breakfast. I just wanted to eat like a ton of carbs, like a ton of food, and like a big thing. And then, you know, I talked to my mom on the phone for a while. We went back to have an afternoon nap after just like going on a hike and eating a ton of pancakes. And I remember my waters released around 4 or 5 p.m. when like the kids, and we were kind of napping. I remember thinking like, oh, like I'm actually gonna have a baby. You know, that moment where you're like, you can prepare all you want. And I'm like, oh, do I really, is this actually what I want to do? Like, I'm actually just gonna have a free birth. And like, there's a new child coming into our family. And I remember looking at Zach and he kind of had the same look like, oh yeah, it's on. Like, gonna have a baby. And this was early October 5th. But then what ended up happening is my waters kept releasing and they were like kind of pea soup. They were like meconium, which was, and as a precursor or whatever, like I'm not telling anyone what to do about their own bodies, but for me, I could feel clearly this was another like invitation into playing drama, or not. And it felt like the dark night of the soul. I was flooded with all the shame that I'd had with Anat's birth. I'm going to kill my baby. I care more about my experience. I mean, it was awful. I felt like I was going insane from the inside, just chattering voices that were not mine.
Whoa.
And I was like, so it was getting dark. Kids go to sleep. Zach goes to sleep. I'm like outside naked in our backyard, which was to the green belt, just swing. And there was, you know, I was like started catching it like in a mason jar. And I was like, oh my God, it is really like green. It didn't smell or anything. And I could feel my baby kicking. And so I started just things I'd learned over the years. I started saying, how do you feel, Amy? And I was like, I feel good. I feel at peace. So that means my baby feels good. Do you know what I mean? Just like apart from the physical world, like what's actually happening. And I had never really been pushed so much to do that. And just like, you are your baby. You are your baby. And so like, it was a little bit heart-wrenching and scary, but it's like I had to face all my demons. It was a dark night of the soul. I had to say, do I own this birth no matter what happens? Because I remember thinking, if something's wrong with my baby, no one will forgive me. Like it, you know, it was like the sin, like the Eve, like I'm cursed. I will bear the weight of all of it. And I could feel it in the middle of the night. And I just paced the floor. I read like some quick PDF of Marin with Indie Birth had done a little podcast that I read the PDF real quick about meconium, which was like, sometimes it doesn't even mean anything, you know, just that sort of like evidence. And I remember thinking, okay, so it doesn't mean anything. I feel good. It's not like, I'm not like gushing blood. It doesn't smell like, this is just, sometimes babies just poop. I don't know why. I'm not going to the hospital. Again, I had my phone, like, should I call these midwives that I know? And it was just took all this self-control. I drank a lot of water, coconut water, and just swayed throughout the night and kind of like battled my demons of like, how much can you own your choice? And I remember for a second I went into like bratty mode where I was like, this just isn't fair, you know, like all my births have been so straightforward. And of course the one birth that I'd want to have a free birth and be meconium, you know, like I'm a victim of this, like the world, life is out to get me. Like I said, I'm gonna have a free birth and now I won't get to, like, there was this like bratty voice in my head. Why isn't it easier? You know? And I remember the sun was coming up. It was the most beautiful, like October in Texas is so beautiful. It's like 75 degrees. The sun was coming up. And I remember still the meconium and like I had rags and I was like trying to hide them. It was like my shame. You know, I didn't want anyone to see the meconium rags, whoever might come in. And I remember I was just like, this baby's coming. You know, if it had been like a really difficult or long labor, I may have considered something else, but it was like, it was the rhythm of the birth process. My baby was coming. And I remember thinking like, am I ready to have my baby? And I just had this fear because of Anat's birth and not just her birth, all the cultural conditioning, like, will my baby be alive? Because if she's not, it's my fault and no one will ever forgive me. And I remember looking in the mirror, she was born around 9 a.m. This was probably 7:30 or 8 a.m. And I just looked at myself like a coach and I was just like, you don't believe this. You do not believe women are to blame for it. Like, this is not what you believe. And I remember saying, this is your dream. Like, I'd worked so hard to get here. And I said it to myself, this is your dream. Take it, like, do it. And I'm like getting chills. And
Me
so,
too.
it was like, I had to have this like coach persona, just be like, you have worked for this. You are not throwing it away right now. So I was like, I could feel my baby kicking. So I'm like, I know she's alive. I know she's alive. I don't believe all this shit. And I called my friend Stacy, who had synchronistically lived, like, we didn't know when we were into her house, she lived, a few blocks away. And I just wanted a woman there, not there. It was actually great because Anat was like, woo, going crazy. Because Anat woke up around 8:45. So Stacy gets there. She peeks her head in the bathroom where I'd set up like this nest. I wanted to catch my own baby. I wanted nobody to touch me. Like, this was my birth. So I threw down pillows and comforters just in case she like fell on the tile, you know? And Stacey peeks her head in and I said, I don't think I'm gonna do it anymore. And she just like looked at me and she had tears in her eyes. She said, this is the path. This is the path. And I was like, okay. So I shut the door because I didn't know if I'd want her there. And then I realized, okay, I don't actually want her in the room with me. And then she fed Anat breakfast because Anat had been like screaming in between surges at me and holding my leg.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is why, because I'd woken Zach up around 8:30. They were like sleeping late. And then I knew when if I woke up Zach. So she was feeding them. I did want Zach with me. And I started like pacing like a caged animal. Like, I remember I turned the shower on, then I turned the bath on. like, what do I want? And the baby's like coming out, you know, I'm like, maybe the water? And I turn it off. And I remember I'm holding onto the bar, and Zach actually has a picture of me that he took because I didn't want any pictures, but he's really sweet and just took one that I didn't see till later. I'm holding onto the bar and leaning on it like the towel bar. And I remember he was just in his mind thinking like, I really hope she doesn't rip that off the wall and hurt herself. But so he would like in between surges just kind of hang on it himself because he didn't want to disturb me.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of the birth was actually her immersion. So we have like this full mirror, and I put my arms around him and I feel her coming out like that freight train, just the way I describe it. And I'm like, get her. Or I don't say her, I don't answer her. I'm like, get my baby, get her. And Zach backs away from me because he knew. And I was like, please help me. I can't. And he didn't say anything. He just like walked like 6 feet back. And he may have said something like, just put your hands down. Just, you can do it. And I was like, no, I can't. Like, I felt like I was freaking out. And he's like the way he tells it now, he's like, I was not touching that baby. No, I'm responsible for that. Yeah. All I've talked about for years is receiving it. I'm not fucking touching that baby.
And his love and presence and reverence and dignity in that, I will not take that away from you.
No matter. And I was screaming at him like, I can't, like a wild animal. And and I love that. He's a really stoic person. So he didn't say like, you can do it. He just moved his body away from me. Like, you're not gonna grab my arm, like you know. So I did it, and I got this slippery little baby. She was screaming, like it was just so healing from Anat's birth. Like, she was healthy. And I remember I didn't like mean to look in the mirror, but I picked her up and I could see myself, and I just was like, my smile was so huge. I was just like, oh, like, I did it. She's alive. Like, she's healthy, and I didn't do anything wrong. And there's no judgment or punishment or some like recompense to pay, you know. Like, it really felt like I was carrying like the sin of Eve on my shoulders just for being a woman, really.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, our bodies work, good things happen. Us being in total sensual ecstatic bliss is not a sin. Like, I didn't realize I still carried all this like coding from childhood, that my bliss and total fulfillment and being in my body would be at odds with like the moral good. Do you know what I mean? Which is like a very Judeo-Christian or patriarchal religious stance, is that like woman is other, and therefore we have to disembody ourselves from the life-giving part of us, sexual, sensual, creative. And that felt like the dark, like I was like battling that. And then just, yeah, we walked into the bedroom, and I laid down with her. Oh, and another thing, the placenta didn't come for like an hour. And usually I birth my placentas in like 10 minutes. And so I was nervous about it because I'd never given birth without the guardian. And Zach was so great. Like, I felt, you know, when you move sometimes after birth or postpartum, you have like a gush of clots. And it's like he could read my mind. I didn't do anything, but I must have done. And he goes, it's it's just blood. It's fine. And it's just like, he was just there saying.
And I would argue that you, for the first time, gave birth with a true guardian, having him there in that way and in that space holding.
Yeah, because it's like he knew all the inside out parts of me. He knew like that I'm going to feel that gush and see the clots and think.
And that he didn't take anything away from you, that he was your guardian. He did like true logistical and spiritual guardianship.
Yeah. And it's like he could almost psychically, it's like he just said the very few things. Just, yeah, what a good midwife would do. He stayed away from me until I asked him to hold the baby. And then I remember just Stacy came in the room at this point, and Zach said he felt like I was a queen, like someone was holding the baby. It was still attached to the cord, and I was waddling like they were like I don't know if the word's like courtiers or something, like just because I was like, okay, I'm gonna sit on the toilet to try to get the placenta out, because I was just so in my head actually at this point, like, oh, when's it gonna go wrong? I don't even think I posted on the membership till she was like 48 hours old, because I really had this trauma of like, she's gonna die if I claim my joy too early. And I'm sure so many women you know, so then anyway, I just this is funny, I wanted to save my placenta. I thought I might eat it. I still have it, but I didn't want to eat it. But Zach was gonna like do things to it for me, and so it comes out into the toilet, and then I immediately start peeing. Zach's like, don't pee, and he's like, well, it's fine, just pee on
Plus
it.
it's like covered in meconium.
Yeah, exactly. And and she had meconium all over her, and I, you know, then I was like, oh my god, did she aspirate, did she this or that? And so yeah, it took me about 2 or 3 days to be like, I would kind of like listen to her breathing, and I'd have Zach listen to it, and he was like, I was like, okay, well, we can go to the hospital if we need to. And he's like, Amy, we're not going to the hospital. You know, he was very much like, your baby's nursing, your baby's kicking her legs around, like we're not going anywhere. Just very like holding that space, like you're allowed. Yeah, now saying it out loud, I wasn't allowing myself. I thought I would be punished, as fucked up as that sounds, if I allowed myself to say, I did it, life is amazing, I trust life, I trust my body. I just was like waiting for the other shoe to drop. I started being afraid my milk wouldn't come in. I mean, I nursed my babies till Isabella, you know, would joke, because I'd go spend the night at her house in Austin or her apartment, and I would pump like with a 2-year-old, like these crazy, there's no milk problems, but it's just so interesting looking back, almost seeing myself from a bird's eye view, like without a state guardian. Does my milk work? Like, will my breast produce milk? Will my baby die? I so much indoctrination that just came off like shedding skin. It's like my milk came, and I had the most psychedelic postpartum. Zach had about 4 or 5 weeks off of work, and he brought me like congee, that pudding the rice pudding every morning. He made me these turmeric lattes, like no coffee, like from scratch. I just stayed in bed. I bought some sundresses. I don't think I got out of bed till like maybe week 7. I let my aunt come and my mom around day 5 or 6, but yeah, I didn't leave the house for 4 or 5 weeks. I'd had, because I had such a traumatic postpartum with Anat, and I was like very vigilant. I just thought, oh, postpartum has to be really fucked up, because I'd never been taken care of like that. Zach had always gone back to work within a day or 2. And then I was just like, this is a psychedelic trip postpartum. And I remember the trees look different. The first time we went to an Indian restaurant, week 5 postpartum, I was in the back with my baby and just seeing the trees. And I'd actually never done mushrooms or anything at that point, but I was like, that's what's available to us as women. The light shining in, that like early fall light, watching my kids climb trees in the backyard, nursing my baby naked, because I'd go outside naked. I was tripping. Like, when
it's like heightened states of ecstasy.
Right. And it went on for, I remember the first time I had a beer afterwards, it like brought me down. Maybe I was 2 or 3 months postpartum, and I was like, oh, I don't want alcohol. I was just, anyway, it was.
Yeah, it's postpartum bliss, right?
Postpartum bliss, which I think you need to have a non-traumatic birth to open the gates to that, and then you need to be cared for after, you know?
Yeah, it is inherent to our physiology, and we have to, in our current culture, really create a radical environment for it to, it's simple, but also not, like you said.
Right. yeah, it's so simple, but it's like I had to, I had to
Claim
shed
it.
all the layers of indoctrination that really
Yeah.
came down to like woman hating and life hating.
Hmm.
Like what happens if you're just a woman and you just let your body do whatever it's going to do?
Yeah. It's a big deal. Weirdly.
Weirdly, I feel like I'm still reaping the lessons, like,
Mhm.
and they're not always the ones you want. Like you can't, once you have a free birth, like you can't settle for things that you would. Do you know what I mean?
Of course I do.
You can't lie to yourself anymore when things don't feel good, when you're not living your life.
It's
And
harder.
it's harder. It's a lot
Yeah.
harder.
It's
You can
harder.
do it, but it hurts more.
Yeah.
You can.
All right. Love you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily.
And that's it for today, my sisters. Check out everything we do, including one-on-one and group coaching, learn about our private membership, in-person retreats, and more on freebirthsociety.com. Our online courses are on freebirthsocietycourses.com, including our flagship course, The Complete Guide to Free Birth. Don't miss the Radical Birthkeeper School if you're ready to become the authentic midwife that women are searching for. Together we rise, and the revolution starts inside each of us. I'll leave you with our Free Birth Society theme song, Wild Woman by Aruba Red.
I honor you for the wisdom you held, the ancient traditions of plant medicine and womb magic. I feel the spirit of the ancestors as I place my hands upon my belly. This sacred portal will be honored. Eons upon light beams of survival, withstanding the eradication of our power by design. I will not allow the separation of our young to be forced upon me. My sisters will no longer birth in captivity. The picket line redefined from burning our wild women to paralyzing us and drugging our babes. Strapped down in a clinical white bed, drying up the milk from our breasts. Keep your needles. My family will never again be doomed to chase those dragons or your poison. We reject your fear. We choose love. Everything with intention. Death, ascension. I will fly and bring her back from the stars. Conscious